So, I guess we can just start out with, tell me the account that you had.
Okay, I'm Dennis David. I was the chief of the day at the Naval Medical School on November 22nd, 1963. And when at about 1 o'clock Eastern Time was when we heard the president had been shot. And then, I don't know, about by 1:30 it came over the public radio that he was dead and assassinated. And then about 2 o'clock, I get a call from the Master at Arms of the Naval Medical School and told me, says, David, we're setting the watch, which meant all non-essential personnel would go home. And he said, so you need to come over and assume the duty. So I did. And then about 5 o'clock that evening, I and Dr. Boswell were in the office, which served as the Master at Arms office at that time, that I got a call from, we heard on the radio that the body was going to be brought back to Bethesda for autopsy. I remember looking at Dr. Boswell and told him, I said, it's going to be one hell of a night. And that was putting it mildly. And then about 5:30, I got a call from Chief Ledbetter, who was my counterpart. He was the senior enlisted man on duty at the Naval Hospital, and was at the information desk, or the main desk, when you came into the National Naval Medical Center. And he said, you need to come up here. There's some men that want to talk to us. So I went up, and also the chief of the day for the Naval Dental School came in. And these two men identified themselves as Secret Service and said, this is officially notifying you that the body is going to be brought back for autopsy. So you will, their instructions, you will put guards on every space under your command's control and allow no one in. And if anyone attempts to come in, you're to hold them and notify us immediately, and we'll take care of it. So, and then we left, and I called men out of my duty section, assigned them to posts, and gave them their instructions. And then I went back down to the Master at Arms shack, and I also had called Captain Stover, who was our commanding officer, and he told me he had heard over the radio that the body was being. He says, and he said, "That's okay, David." He says, "I heard." He says, "I'm on my way in." So then nothing else came up until it was about 6:25, 6:30. I got a call from Chief Ledbetter. He said, "David, your visitor is on his way." And he said, so I said, "Okay, fine." And he said that he said, "Your visitor's on his way and he need help to offload." So I immediately went down and I called 3 of my men in and told them to meet me by the morgue on the back dock. Called the chief of the day of the dental school and asked, I said, "Bob, have you got any extra bodies?" And he said, "Yeah, what do you need?" I said, "I could use a couple or 3. He said, "Well, I got 3. I said, "Okay, he says, "Where do you want them?" I said, "Meet me on the jetty behind the morgue entrance." So then I went down and ran down to the morgue, or fast walk down there, and the 6 men that I'd asked for were all coming in, standing there, and probably a couple, 3 minutes when this black hearse pulls up, backs up to the jetty, and 5 or 6 men in their suits, which I assume were Secret Service, opened up the back door and then proceeded to lift a shipping casket out of the hearse and push it, slide it up on the jetty because it was higher than, they couldn't, they had to park a little ways from the jetty because it was tall enough they couldn't have opened up the doors. And then they put this up on the jetty, and I directed my men, 3 on each side, to pick the casket up, and then directed them to take it into the ante room or the cooler room of the morgue. And while they were doing this, the driver and his sidekick came up and stood beside me on the jetty, and I asked him something about how was traffic, and he said, "Oh, not too bad." He said we had come up 16th Street and then onto Jones Bridge Road, and then came in through the back gate, which is right where the officers' club and the bachelor officers' quarters. You had to come in through the gate, and then come down to get to the back of the morgue, where the morgue area was. And then a couple of these suits, I guess, Secret Service, a couple of them went into the cooler room, and then I told my men to go back to where they had come from and stand by. And then I walked up front, and I stopped several different places and checked with my men to see if anybody had to go to the bathroom or needed to break, get a drink or something, and then I proceeded on up and went up on the second floor of the front building, and was right where I was looking. There's a 2-story rotunda, which is the main entrance of the National Medical Center, and I could hear a lot of commotion outside, so I walked over and looked out the window, and there's a driveway that comes in off Wisconsin Avenue, makes a semicircle and goes back out onto Wisconsin Avenue. So, and in that semicircle, there's probably 2, maybe 3 football fields inside of space, and it was just one solid mass of humanity. You couldn't see a blade of grass. There was that many people, looking. And both sides of that driveway were lined up with, and I remember Washington, D.C. police, Bethesda police, Silver Spring police, Marines, Navy, Maryland State Police, and they were lined up almost shoulder to shoulder, that whole area from one entrance, from one Wisconsin Avenue up here to down to Wisconsin Avenue outlet on the other end. And Wisconsin Avenue at that time was 4 lanes, and the cars were jammed up bumper to bumper. It was amazing, the number of people there, the mechanics. And shortly after that, it was about 7, give or take, I saw a helicopter land on the pad, which is up near the Wisconsin street, and I saw figures because it was getting dusk. And very, it wasn't. You couldn't see very plain, but you could see figures in it. And some men got off of that and offloaded a box that looked a little bit. It was about the size of a coffin, but which I later found out wasn't a coffin. I had used that term to describe it in other times. And a couple of minutes after this helicopter landed, I saw a Washington, D.C. police car pull into the driveway and followed by the Green Navy ambulance. it proceeded up and pulled up in front of the Naval Medical Center. And I watched Mrs. Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy get out. And also I remember Admiral Galloway getting out of the driver's side of the car. So then I turned around and walked back so that I was directly in line, looking straight down at the front door, and watched Mrs. Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, and Secretary McNamara come in. And they walked across the rotunda, they walked across, and the elevators were right behind me, if you will. So I heard the elevator doors open, so I turned around and watched them go to the 17th floor, which was the VIP suite at that time. Then later, and then I went back and made my rounds periodically. I was down in the morgue area maybe 4 or 5 times between then until till midnight. And about 11 o'clock, I was down in the morgue area, on the outside the morgue, in the passageway, and the administrative watch officer for the day saw me and said, "David, do you know anybody that can type and has a security clearance?" And I said, "Yes, I'm a MAT tech, a medical administrative tech. I can type, and I'm cleared through secret." He said, "Well, this gentleman needs to have a memorandum typed. Where can we do it?" I said, "Well, come with me, follow me." And so I took him back up on the 2nd floor to the Naval Medical School administrative office, and then proceeded to type. This man wanted a memorandum for the record. So I got all the necessary paper, the memorandum out, set up, and he began to dictate this memorandum. And while he was dictating, he took this pillbox out of his pocket and had set it on the desk beside mine. The memorandum on this date, for the record, to whom it may concern type thing. The following objects were removed from the head of the President John F. Kennedy during postmortem procedures this evening, on this date. And then he proceeded to describe 4 objects that had been taken out. And when he finished dictating, I took the memorandum out of the typewriter, handed it to him. He started to proofread them, checking them. And while he was doing that, I picked this pillbox up and looked at it, and he saw me and he says, "Go ahead and look at them." So I uncapped it, poured them out my hand, and there were 4 pieces of lead that to me were obviously from a bullet. Now there was too much material there for 1 bullet, maybe not enough for 2. So, so then he finished his proofing of it, and I had poured the fragments back into the pill vial, capped it, and handed it to him, and he put it in his pocket. Then he reached over and took the tape cartridge out of the typewriter, because it was one of those IBM Selectrics. And I always wondered about that. And at that time, I wondered, why? Then I remembered a person could take that tape out and stretch it out, because it's only used one time, and they could have read what the memorandum was all about. It's it all sounds a little sinister, but it's true. You could do that. So then he put the paperwork, cartridge, everything in his pocket or someplace, and proceeded to leave. And as he went to the door, as he went out, he turned around and he says, Now, he said, remember, this is to be treated as classified and not discussed with anybody. So then he went on his way. I went on my way, and that was all the involvement I had. Then about 2 o'clock in the morning, I went up to the snack bar, and there was 7 or 8 enlisted sitting around. We were drinking coffee, talking, and that's when we already get. Hey, did you know that there was 2 caskets came into the night? Somebody else says, no, there was 3 caskets that came into the night. Another guy says, another enlisted man said, wait, you know they brought a brain in through the emergency room at the Naval Hospital, put it in a nemesis basin, put it on and covered it with a towel, put it on a gurney and rolled it down to the morgue. I mean, there was all kinds of weird crap going on. These are all rumors, things. So I found out later that the body was taken from the morgue sometime after midnight, and then taken where it was, I believe, to the White House for the first time, where it lay in state. And I went to bed about 5:30, 5:45. I just went in and laid down. I didn't even get undressed, and then got a half hour, an hour sleep. I woke up and then wrote up the official log for the Naval Medical School. All commands maintain a daily log that can't have any changes, erasures, or anything, because it's an illegal document. And I wrote that up. Captain Dr. Boswell came down, looked at what I had written, everything, signed off on it. I signed off on it, and then we took it up to Captain Stover and took it to his office. I handed him the log. He looked at it and then said, no, this is not correct. And I said, beg your pardon, Captain. I kept notes all night long. He said, the hours and the times are wrong. And I said, oh? He says, no, you're to change this time, this time, this time, this time. You're to change them. So I did as I was told. He was my boss. I mean, besides. And so I had to rewrite the log. I used a razor blade to cut out the sheet, the one page, because we used a journal with hard covered lined paper, an accountant's journal. And so I cut the page out and then rewrote all my notes that had things. And then I went home. And the next day, around 5:36 in the evening, my wife and I were watching the events of the day before, and they showed the Air Force One offloading this fancy bronze casket, and they talks that this was contained the body, the president, and everything. And I remember saying to my wife, I said, God damn, that's something strange. I said, because that's not the casket we got him in. That I got him in he was in a shipping casket. And so that was the first indication to me that something wasn't legal or right. There was something wrong here. Well, on Monday or Tuesday, when I was back to work, I saw Dr. Boswell, and I asked him, I said, which casket was he in? And Dr. Boswell looked at me and he said, well, you ought to know, you were there. And I was only there for one casket delivery. Later on, years later, it was said, well, there was a casket that came in with a major, Air Force major, and he's the one that was in that shipping casket. I says, BS. Because in that particular time frame, if you had a military person killed or died on duty, active duty, his body would be shipped back to his hometown with another enlisted man or another officer, anyway, a person of equal rank or rate, whatever, would have escorted that body. It would not have been escorted by 6 men in suits. You know, so to me to say that that shipping casket was not with the president was be silly, because it wouldn't have been normal procedure. And so I'm convinced that the shipping casket definitely was. And then later on, cooking forward to 1992, which from that I met in Pittsburgh, Rick Russo, who's an investigator, had gotten Jim Jenkins, Paul O'Connor, Gerald Custis, and Floyd Reeby, and myself, and Dr. Weck, Cyril Weck, had gotten us all together in Pittsburgh in '92. And when I walked in, I saw Paul, and the forum was Paul and the others were there. Cyril Weck hadn't got there yet, but Paul was there. When I walked into the bar, Paul O'Connor said, "Denny, what casket was the president's body in?" I said, "The shipping casket." He said, "See, I've been telling you all this," because he too had seen this, and so had Floyd and Custis, and they also said, yeah, they had helped take him out of the shipping casket and put him up on the autopsy table. Jim didn't remember, because at the time that this happened, when it was going on, he was making up some preparations for the autopsy, so he didn't actually see him in the casket. And then, so that's basically all I know about. Now on Monday after the autopsy, I had gone over. I was trying to qualify and get a commission, because I was an E6 enlisted man at the time, and I'd made up my mind when I decided to make a career of the Navy, I wasn't going to retire as a white hat. I was going to retire as a commissioned officer. So there was a test coming up in January, and Bill Pitzer was one of my mentors, if you will. He was a lieutenant medical service corps, and he was helping me, advising me on what to study, things like that. So on Monday, I had some questions about the test coming up in January. So I just walked into his office, and he said, he said, Denny, you got to see this. Come on over. So then he showed me this 16 millimeter tape and these black and white and colored photos that were obviously of the autopsy. And we looked at those, and both of us were convinced that the entry wound was right at the forehead, just above the right eye, right at the hairline, just off the corner of the right eye. And we saw that, then we saw the entrance wound in the throat, and the very, very sloppy attempt to put a tracheotomy in. And both of us commented on that was pretty damn sloppy, because Bill had done them in his time, and I had done them in my time, so, we may not have been experts, but we knew how to do it correctly. And while we were we only watched, like, say, about the first 3-4 feet of the film, and we saw those things, and then we could see hands, saw 4 hands, about elbow down only. We couldn't see the bodies or who they were, but the body was rolled up on its left side, and we observed the entry wound which was about oh, from the atlas of the neck to about down about 4.5 inches down, and 1.5 inches to the right. We saw where another entry wound. That was where it was found. And let's see. Then I never asked Bill if he had done it, because since he was head of the audiovisual, I just assumed that he had done it, because I found out later he may or not be. It's still a controversy because Reeby says that he saw Bill in the morgue that night. Others, Paul didn't remember for sure, nor did James Jenkins, and Custis died before I could ever ask him if he remembered him being there. And so I left, and I didn't get a commission in '64. They made 40 MSCs that year, and I was 42nd on the list. But I retook the program in '65, and I was number 2 on the list of 40. So I achieved one of my goals while I was in the Navy, and they sent me off to essentially is Officer Candidate School. What it is, they give you a 3-week period between going from enlisted to a commission, because there is a difference in the relationships. And also I went to 11 weeks of Naval Justice School. Well, from Naval Justice School I then went to Naval Hospital, Great Lakes, and while I was there, Barb Monroe, a Lieutenant Commander, Medical Service Corps, she was an occupational therapist, came in, and when she saw me, we renewed friendships and everything. And she said, "Did you hear about Bill?" I said, "No, what happened?" She said, "Well," says, "they'd say he committed suicide, but there was a lot of strange circumstances that was kind of weird." And I said, "Like what?" And he said, "Well, his hand was mangled, as though they couldn't even take his wedding ring off, and they said he'd been shot himself in the head." And I said, "It doesn't, I remember Bill as being left-handed, and I couldn't figure that out. But then I found out later he was right-handed. He just used to, when we played bridge, Barb Monroe, I, and Bill, he would frequently deal left-handed and just deal backwards, and we'd kid him about it. It was, so I got the impression he was left-handed. But when Barb said something about his being shot, she said there was, also it looked like that Bill's office, because he died in his office, and she said it looked like there'd been there was chair overthrown, there was paper scattered all over, and I said, it's like they were looking for somebody. And I said, "Well, wonder if they were looking for the material in the autopsy that Bill had." She said, "You knew about that?" I said, "Definitely." I said, "I saw him on Monday after the autopsy." I said, "And Bill and I had looked at him." And so I don't remember we said much more about it after that. And then after that, I never talked to anybody again, although I was commissioned in the first week of December of '65, and Bill was there along with 3 other of my mentors. I had 4 mentors, and when Captain Stover swore me in, after Bill come over and give me a big hug, and he says, "Well, shipmate," he says, "I'm going to be retiring next year, and so we probably will never serve together again. But he says good luck and Godspeed. And then we left. I left there and went to That's when I went to Newport, Rhode Island, where they went to officer candidate school and the things. But that was the last time I ever talked about it with anybody until I was back from NAM and had gone to school at again back to Bethesda, where I went to school at the Naval School of Healthcare and for a year and a half, which is what it took me to complete my degree, I went to George Washington University as a program. And then from there, I'd gone back to Great Lakes and was on the Commandant 9th Naval District staff for about a year. And then they made me a administrative officer, or gave me the job of administrative officer for the Naval Dental Research Institute in Great Lakes. Okay, fast forward, 1974, I'd just been promoted to lieutenant commander, medical service corps, and became one of two officers, medical service corps officers, who were given the title of executive officer, which gave us Article 15 ability, which we could hold court-martials, or we could assign captain's mask and assign penalties and whatever for anybody that got in trouble. And so on my way to work one morning, I picked up this Waukegan Sun. And when I got there, poured my coffee, read my paper, and there was an article in there by Art Peterson of the Waukegan Sun that told about a group from Pennsylvania that had come to Lake County Community College, gave a presentation on the Kennedy assassination. This was in 1974. And it was so much BS that I literally got mad. So I called the Waukegan Sun, asked to speak to Art. He came on. I asked him, I said, you wrote this article on this group coming to Lake County College? He said, yeah. I said, can you tell me how I can get a hold of them? He said, why would you want to know that? I said, because they don't know what the hell they're talking about. He said, how do you know they don't know what they're talking about? I said, because I was there. And the phone almost went dead. I thought, well, he's hung up on me. But then, it was only two or three seconds, or 30 seconds maybe. But then he'd come back and he says, I want to talk to you. And I says, I says, I'm still on active duty and I'm not about to put my career in jeopardy by talking to a reporter. He says, well, you know we can guarantee anonymity. And I said, yes, I know you can. He says, I guarantee you, if you come talk to me, I'll never reveal your name unless you tell me I can. So I went to see him. We made an arrangement like 2 or 3 days later. I met him downtown at a restaurant, and we were off in a corner, and I told him what happened. And about a week later, he published an article called Lake County Informant. He just said that a resident of Lake County had talked to him and told him about things that went on at Bethesda on that night. That article, a professor of history at the University of Knoxville, or University of Tennessee in Knoxville, read it, knew that David Lifton was trying to write this book, and on the assassination. He sent it to David, and then sometime in early 79, this is what David told me, he was getting ready to put his book Best Evidence to bed, and he says, I went back and went over all my records I'd accumulated. He says, I came across your article and decided to see what I had to say. So he called Art Peterson, and Art then called me and he says, this guy wants to do a book. Is it all right if I give him your name and phone number? And I said, certainly, you may do so. So then about a week went by, and David Lifton called me on the phone. I talked to him for about 4 hours on the phone. And then after we I finally convinced David that yes, I received the body, and yes, it was in a black hearse, not a gray ambulance, and yes, I got it 20 or 30 minutes before the official ambulance with the official casket came in. We went over and over that subject 4 or 5 times when I finally convinced him that that's what happened. So then he asked me, then went and said, well, he said, do you know anybody that will corroborate this story? Well, I couldn't remember any names except one, and that was a friend of mine, Spider, Larry Webb. They called him Spider. He was another MSC officer and one of my mentors at that time. And told him where Larry was at. He then, and of course this is all secondhand now, it's what David told me. David apparently then called Larry. Larry had not been there that night, so he had nothing to say, but he remembered some of the who were, like Chief Ledbetter and some others, and gave that info to David, and David then contacted these people. And so it was about 2-3 months later, David called me back and told me that he contacted these people, and he says, Dennis, he said, they corroborated everything you said. Can I come see you and visit you at your home? And I said, what do you want to do? He says, I'm going to bring a camera crew and come with me, and we're going to take your statement on film and everything. I said, fine. So he did so. And this was, like February, or like October or September of '79. And they came out, and then that was the last contact I had with David until into '98 was the next time I saw him. But anyway, his book was released in 1980 or 81, and when that book hit, I'm not sure, I'm really not sure how my hometown found out about it, but I know all of a sudden I start getting calls from the radio station in Champaign-Urbana, the News Gazette, the commercial news called me, wanted to talk to me, So, and I told them basically what was in best evidence, and then the History Channel started carrying some of it. And next thing I know, I walk downtown, and Houston's a town of about 5,800 people, and I was, at that time, working I was a personnel manager for one of the largest employers in the town, and I did a lot of the hiring and firing, so a lot of people knew me, and they'd see me on TV. I'd go downtown, somebody invariably would yell at me and say, hey, I saw you on TV last night. And that's basically everything. And then I got I pretty well just gave lectures and talks to schools, business groups, women's groups, men's groups like the Lions Club, and things like that until '98, when Debbie Conway from Dallas called and asked me if I would come down and speak at the organization here. And so I agreed to do that. Paul O'Connor, also the two of us, then talked. And we gave our presentations. And I met William Law, who was eventually wrote In the Eye of History, which gives my whole story as part of his book. And he also interviewed Paul O'Connor, Jim Jenkins, and all the people that David Lifton had included. David did not put our whole story in there. All he had put in was the difference in the time arrivals and the type of arrivals, and he really wasn't too concerned about my story on Bill Pitzer or any of that. He was just wanting, because his idea that he projected, and it became a bestseller, was that the body was the best evidence for a trial or anything like that. So, and after that, and then William Law decided to write a book, and first contacted me I saw him down here in 203 at a meeting, and that's when he then said he was getting ready to write this book, and asked if I would talk to him. I said, of course. So then he ended up taking me to Oregon to his home, and we put everything I had said, much of what I've just told you, on tape. And that came out in about 06 or 07, his first one. And that's basically right up to date on my whole experience. So,
could you describe in as much detail as you want to, about what you watched in the 16 millimeter?
Okay.
Yeah.
The only thing I observed in there was when I looked at that film and the pictures, that both Bill and I were convinced, without any doubt, that the entry wound in the forehead and the exit wound back here involving the occipital parietal area was the killing shot. So, to us, the Warren Commission report was a farce, because the body, to us, it was obvious that the shots had to come from the front, and there was a shot from the back. Okay, you got two shooters, that's a conspiracy by definition. So it wasn't a lone shooter. At that time we had, and later on, I mean, was Oswald a shooter? Hell, I had no idea. But if he was, he wasn't the only one. There had to be other shooters involved. And that's all I could tell you right now about that. I can't tell you who. I've heard numerous names of other people that were probably the shooters. They may well be right. From what I've read and what I know about Oswald, I've also talked to other people, other investigators besides Judith Baker. And to be honest with you, I don't believe, seriously do not believe, that Oswald was a shooter. I think he was a patsy that got involved in something over his head, and he got killed for it.
I think I only have two more questions.
Okay.
Now, earlier you described the device that you watched it on, and also the angle of the
What?
camera.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I think that the tape that we saw, the 16 millimeter job, was from a camera in the autopsy room. several people denied that it was ever there, although one investigator finally got Dr. Humes to admit, yes, there was a closed-circuit TV that was tied up with the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology, which made sense because they did, and now I don't know whether Bill had anything to do with the taking of that film, but he would have been a logical choice, and especially since he was head of the audiovisual department, he would have been a logical choice to do the editing of it, to check it out. So, I think that's where it came from. Neither Jim Jenkins or Paul O'Connor could recall that camera being there, but it could have been something installed in the ceiling or something or whatever. So, I don't know.
Trying to think, there was one other question I had. Oh yes, how many photos were there, and how large was the reel?
The reel was at least 3/4 full, so I don't know how many feet that is. You're talking to somebody that has no idea, but it was a full reel, so it had to be at least a couple of hours, I would guess. I don't know. But we only looked at about 4 feet of it, so I have no idea how many feet it was. The number, if I stretch my memory, I think we saw about 4 or 5. There were 4 or 5 black and whites, and about the same number of color photos that were there.
And you also described the rear area as not what we view in the ones that.
No.
Yeah.
If you were to take get a copy of David Lifton's book, which is one of the few books I remember has the pictures of the head wounds, that's not the pictures I saw. It doesn't even closely resemble them because the massiveness just wasn't there. And in the picture that in best evidence, you'll see the one. I think it's one picture. They call it the death stare, and when you look at it, you see a large flap of bone and flesh like this, and that was not on any of the pictures or the tape or the film that I saw on Monday after the autopsy in Bill Pitzer's office.
How would you measure the front wound and the rear wound?
The front wound was, say, 3/8 of an inch in diameter, about the size of my little finger. But it's about the size that a .38 slug or something of that, like that, would have caused. The wound, the exit wound that we saw in the back, was roughly the size of an orange, about 2.5 to 3 inches wide and 3.5 to 4 inches long, but not in a rectangle. It was more in a shape like this,
And what shape is that?
It wasn't rectangular shape. It was more round, but and it's
More of like an oval?
Oh, an oval. It was more oval than square, yeah.
An oval that's wide or is up and
It was about, on the head it would have been about 2.5 to 3 inches this way and about 3 to 4 inches this way and that way, like that. And it didn't involve the frontal, but it only that what we saw undamaged was the occipital and parietal involvement, the bones. The temporal bone we did not see any damage in the parietal bone or in the temporal bone, which is in this area here, with the exception that the bullet or the entry wound that we felt was right at the hairline, and that was a little close. If you look at the photos in best evidence, you'll see a little V-like cut, and we saw that on the films and the pictures that I'm talking about. But from here back to here, there didn't appear to be any injury. It's perfectly possible that due to the trauma of the gunshot, that the bones here could have been shattered or things, and so, but there was no flap hanging over when we saw it.
Others have also stated that there appeared to be cutting of the head wound in the rear. On the film that you watched, did you ever recall seeing if there was any cuts?
No, there wasn't. There was not.
Okay.
For what it's worth, later on, sometime, and I can't remember, sometime in the 90s or maybe even the early 20s, 2000, I drew for an investigator. I drew. He sent me a picture of a head, asked me to draw out the wounds as I had recalled them, and when I did, I sent it back to him. He took it and compared it, a kind of an overlay on what the doctors in Parkland had described, and they matched perfect. There was no other cuts or injuries, but they matched almost perfectly what I put down. And it wasn't, but yet that night, somebody during the autopsy apparently said there's been surgery to the head. I don't remember who said that. I know that the FBI recorded it as one of their statements, but that wasn't present. There was no indication of surgery to the head on the pictures and the film that I saw. So it had to have been after that body was taken out of the bronze casket, put in a shipping casket, and before the official autopsy began at 8 o'clock that night. Somebody had to have altered those wounds, and that, in order to make it appear as though all of the damage was caused due to rear or gunfire from the rear. So,
if I asked you if you would do a sketch, would you?
Sure.
Okay. And could I also get you to sign it as well, just to authenticate that it's you?
Do what?
Said after these sketch, could I also get you to sign it?
Sign it? Sure.
Okay.
Okay. If we were up, because I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see here. Okay.
Yeah, good, okay, so no worries.
That's a very rough.
Thank you. And I guess my last question. Actually, I had two. What is the device that you said that you watched it on? The reel.
It was on a. You know what a film editor is like?
Yes.
It's one of those hand crank type that you can advance one space at a time. And I think I don't remember the size of the screen, but if I remember right, the screen was like maybe 5x5, a square, maybe or 4x4. I don't know, but it was. Thanks. Okay.
And my last question is, we're not aware of where this reel is at all, right?
It's the government says they don't exist and that they never existed. So what can I tell you? And the only other person I know that knew about him, they killed him in '66.
And he is who?
Hmm?
And he is who?
Yeah,
Who is?
Bill Pitzer. He's the only other person that knew about because he showed him to me, and he died in '66.
And the photos that we have of the autopsy showing that huge wound is not what you
No,
watched.
no, he's not. No. Let me borrow your pen a minute. Here. Okay. You get home and think about something.
You want to give it a few over here.
I can put it underneath here. I'll just give you my email.
Oh, then would you put that over here?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a zero.
Okay.
Okay. The Idaho 0.09 dot at yahoo.com.
Okay.
Maybe you should write it as clear. Right.
Okay, so
I can't even read
what
my
is
own
it?
writing when it gets cold.
It's alright.
Okay.
Mine is so. Okay, so what is it?
DHAI.
DHU
09 at yahoo.com.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is a huge help.
Yeah. The Idaho is actually 2 words. And my ancestors came to this country prior to the Revolutionary War. We came here from Scotland. And in Scotch Gaelic, the Idaho is Black David. My last name is David, but Dahu is Black. The High is David.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate it. Like,
You're welcome.
this
You're
is-
more welcome.